Welcome to the Literature Lounge, where writers and authors share their stories behind their stories.
See, the cause I think is the industry itself. We are very closely knit and closed industry. Very few people come from the outside who find their own calling in this industry, whether it is in book selling or publishing or anywhere. So people within the industry only evolve and become. Now, this also works good for the industry, but it has its own downside. So one, we have to open up these things where we have to now, India, I think, is ripe for specialized bookstores.
So, with books often available online, at much cheaper prices, many readers prefer to shop digitally rather than visit bookstores. So, how do you see this affecting the future of independent bookstores, and what value do you think a physical bookstore still offers that an online platform cannot?
Experience of holding a print book is something which remains tangible. Under this initiative, I've luckily got a psychiatrist, a neurologist, a pediatric neurologist, and also a psychologist on board to understand medical aspect and the actuality of what I'm trying to, portray through this simple line. Without any social media marketing, just a WhatsApp broadcast, we got gathered about 250 or 300 people, which was a magical thing for us. And what we also realized was, this being such an epitome of science, we haven't had much science talks there. So slowly and gradually, I kept on building on that. Coming to the business aspect of it, there's nothing against digital aspects that I have. But when you hold a print book, your brain starts working in a different manner. You absorb more.
So, what makes someone dedicate their life to books in a world that's constantly scrolling? And what does it take to turn a small town bookstore into a living, breathing literary movement? So, in this episode, we sit down with the heart behind Rajat Book Corner, a space that's not just about selling books but building community, sparking ideas, and keeping the magic of reading alive in India's digital age. So, welcome Mohit in today's episode. And before we start, I have to say that Mohit Batra has lived most of his conscious life inside a bookstore and around books. And how lucky is he? Being part of such a culture, he understands the magic that can be created when people come together to discuss something meaningful, which I have experienced myself. So, Mohit, before I start, this conversation with you, your family's bookstore journey began with a small eatery in Amritsar in 1947. So, what do you think inspired your grandfather to place books beside the food counter, and how did that choice shape everything that followed to being where you are today?
Thank you so much, Mahua, for the detailed and beautiful introduction. And before I get into the answering your question, I also want to thank you for inviting me to this beautiful podcast. Coming to my grandfather's idea of starting the eatery, the small eatery. So he had, much like so many millions of people had migrated to India in Amritsar. And I think eatery, much like today, even back then, happened to be one of the easiest things that people think to get into. Sab chalta hai kind of attitude, less investment with a small dhaba kind of thing. A sophisticated dhaba is all I would say. And then he was also passionately into reading. Slowly and gradually, he started keeping his, personal books at the shop. That kept growing, and those were the times when books were not easily available. So he started getting. I mean, with the bookstore, there is right opposite the medical college, and one friend of his, just walked down and said that, "Would you be able to source this particular book for me?" He tried and luckily got a chance to procure that book, and that is how serendipitously this entire thing started. So slowly and gradually he started taking orders one, two at a time, and eventually made bigger space for the bookshelf in the eatery right next to where he would sit. So he would have that gala time, which I'm also now doing, sitting in a business premise and reading your heart's content.
How amazing. It's a very, very lucky life, and you cannot complain. Now, let's just talk about Jaipur. So, in 1992, the Jaipur branch opened and quickly became a literary hub. What was the response like from Jaipur's readers back then, and how has the city's reading culture really evolved over the years? A lot of people are saying that bookstores don't do well. Of course, I refuse to believe that or accept it. I think it's one of the best places that one can go in without a hurry and browse. What is your thought on this?
So I come from a family where, my father particularly has taught me from the very beginning that whatever you're passionate about, business follows. And he has, shown it clearly, where you open a bookshop in Jaipur. A lot of his friends in the trade were against that. I mean, there were better places, more response could have been available at that time, but he chose Jaipur simply because the entry into Jaipur from Delhi highway is gorgeous, and that was one major reason that got him to come here. But to answer your question, Mahua, when a passionate book lover opens a bookshop, primarily it's not only for business; it's for satisfaction. So I think that single idea of the purpose of having a bookshop also played its role when a customer or a reader comes into a bookshop and gets a recommendation. So that slowly and gradually, spread the word for him. And I remember him telling me that he was incidentally also the first person in India to start open exhibitions. So he did that, I think, in 1969 or 79, which was also the year of the child declared by the UNESCO. And he did this exhibition all the way in Dehradun. And
Wow.
so it was not only the bookshop that he would handle, he would go to institutions, schools, medical colleges, since we was, and not only again in Jaipur, he did that in Jodhpur, in Bikaner, and just with a single helper. So he tells me that having 100 bundles of books and carrying them, opening them by himself, and exhibiting them, selling them by hand. So that is the hard work, and literally, I mean, that he has done and sown the seeds for me to bear the fruit of where I am today.
You could have easily followed the XLRI path into a big corporate role, but you chose to return to the bookstore. So, what was that inner calling that influenced this decision of yours? I think very few people will take.
So one of the major reasons was a personal one. Unfortunately, we had lost my mother during that time. Before that, rather, and after, I mean, this was the first time that I had gone for some time out of Jaipur, without not being with my dad. So just a few months of being outside also made me nostalgic, and I just wanted to be with him. We had, I mean, I consider him the longest married partner I have in my life. So that was one of the
So
reasons
beautifully
why.
said.
So that was one of the reasons, for me to come back. And secondly, I had a detailed discussion about the career options with my professor at XLRI. Did all the SWOT analysis, everything that they taught me to analyze the opportunities that I had if I get into a corporate job and if I didn't. So after hearing my heart out, he clearly said that, go back to the bookshop and clean books. That's where your calling is. Forget about the corporate world. It may happen, it may not happen, but you'll be happy. So I guess that was the reason that made me choose coming to the
You've been
bookshop.
curating events, book clubs, and literary gatherings for years now. And what really goes into creating these meaningful community experiences? And how do you really choose which voices or themes you bring forward? Balancing the art of curation, and also there is a business of book selling. So, Mohit, I love that smile because you'll have to tell me how do you bridge that gap, and which I know you do wonderfully.
So, literally, I have spent 30 years of my life in the bookshop, hand selling books, and looking at my father from the very beginning. The small impact that one single book can have on an individual, I've seen that over and over and over and over all this while. So, that is deeply rooted in me that a single book has the power to change anybody's life. They say a single thought can, but I primarily believe, because I'm a bookseller, that a single book can. Now, how did I get into the events thing? I, of course, wanted to get attention to the bookstore. And we have a very small store where we can only accommodate about 10, 15, or maybe 20 people at a time. And that, the constraint became an opportunity where I started reaching out to my friends, connects, acquaintances, customers, everybody. And what happened was, magically we got, all of a sudden I saw myself curating a discussion at Jantar Mantar, which we lovingly call the Taj Mahal of science in India, Hawa Mahal. Now they are not such monuments anywhere on the planet where you can
Yeah.
have these meaningful discussions. Now on one side I had the plethora or the access to some of the best minds in the world, and on the other side I had these beautiful monuments, and on the third side we had a legacy of being in this city for more than 30, 20, 25 years. So access to the database of readers also was there with me. I just simply combined all of it, told, just announced it on my WhatsApp broadcast one day that, listen, we are doing something exciting at Jantar Mantar, why don't you come? Without any social media marketing, just a WhatsApp broadcast, we got gathered about 250, 300 people, which was a
Wow.
magical thing for us. And what we also realized was, this being such an epitome of science, we haven't had much science talks there. So slowly and gradually, I kept on building on that. Coming to the business aspect of it, it was also very disappointing when I saw 300 people coming for a book launch and only 10 of them buying books. And my entire earning was based on that at that point of time. So slowly and gradually, I evolved into that. I simply shifted the books counter that you generally have, in such events. It's kept in a corner where a bookseller like me just grudgingly, smilingly sits there and waits for people to come after the event. कुछ तो खरीदेंगे, but it turns out disappointing. So what I did was I changed the position of that counter from a side space to the entry. You pick up the book, you pay for the book first, and then you get inside. A lot of people say that that's not a good idea. Why should we force book selling on them? But magically, it turned beautiful. Where people also, after listening to the author, when they already had the book, the tangible aspect of holding a book in hand and then listening to the author, the chances of people reading went up. And slowly, again, what I did was I started sending the books 15 days or a month in advance to all the people with whom I would curate these sessions. So even the authors, got a well-read audience. So it became a win-win for everybody. The audience got to meet the author. They had valuable questions. The author got a well-read audience, and of course, as a bookseller, I sold books.
That's a win-win situation, absolutely. Your campaign, "A book is the smartest handheld device," is both witty and bold. In an age of screens and short attention span, which so how do you keep the magic of physical books alive? We would really like our listeners to hear about this.
गुलजार साहब की एक बहुत अच्छी पोएम है. I unfortunately don't remember the entire thing, but there's a line that says, जुबां पे सफ़े का स्वाद. So the experience of holding a print book is something which remains tangible. And under this initiative, I've luckily got a psychiatrist, a neurologist, a pediatric neurologist, and also a psychologist on board to understand the medical aspect and the actuality of what I'm trying to portray through this simple line. So different aspects are there. When you I mean, there's nothing against digital aspects that I have, but when you hold a print book, your brain starts working in a different manner. You absorb more. And secondly, much like the books I have behind me, you cannot show off what you've read through a digital device. So there are different aspects to it. To one is own, but now what I have seen is people who've gone to reading digitally through ebooks or even audibles for that matter. They are also coming back to print books. Even if they consume it on a digital device, they still want to keep a print copy with them for memory's sake. Now, the
Yes.
psychology aspect of it is, if you pull out the book, a print book from your shelf, and just flip through the pages, a lot of content that you've read, just flashes. You remember most of it, which unfortunately cannot happen through a digital device. And the other aspect of why I started this initiative was my son, I think, was 2 and 3 years old when I read a few books on the dark side of technology. And I realized that, a lot of kids nowadays, we have common cases where
Yeah.
ADHD is happening, deficient. Children are not, getting a little erratic because of the calmness that is required to be. Boredom is unfortunately not a thing now, and to read a book you literally have to feel little bored to get into it, to make it exciting, remain committed to finishing a book. So these little aspects is what I wanted to convey. The idea, as I said earlier, was to bring attention to the bookstore, but being a marketing guy, I thought it was much more powerful if I promote books and the industry rather than just my bookstore. And now, one of my very, very dear friends, he's been with me for more than 15 years, attended a few sessions. He gave me a beautiful quote. He said, Mohit, you've spent 30 years of life promoting books. Now books are promoting you.
How beautiful is that, Mohit? That's amazing. So, with books often available online, at much cheaper prices, many readers prefer to shop digitally rather than visit bookstores. I mean, I'm not one of those. I love bookstores. I love the smell of the bookstore. I love being around all those titles, the colors, and all of that. But the reality is that a lot of people are shopping, really at the click of a button, a click, of their thumb. So, how do you see this affecting the future of independent bookstores, and what value do you think a physical bookstore still offers that an online platform cannot?
So, as our lifestyle, I think convenience has taken over experience. And it's
Yes.
only a matter of time when the circle completes and we all come back to experiencing things. It's happening. I mean,
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's happening.
the community centers building up, movies, theaters are coming back, you name it. You know, so many musical concerts are happening now, and people are coming out, getting together. So many cafes in a city like Jaipur or anywhere in the country, you go wherever in the world, that is because we again want to see each other, we want to be together in person. Book clubs are mushrooming. Now, coming to the aspect of bookstore, what happens is, I've seen that multiple times, like you observed it when you were there at the bookstore. Randomly a customer comes in or a reader comes in and they see some author sitting there. That is one thing which you don't find online. Secondly, you meet a friend there who has a list of recommendations. I mean, just imagine standing in front of a bookshelf and recommending books to your friend. I don't think so. It's a beautiful bonding.
Oh, it's
I've,
beautiful.
I've done a small, a ring ceremony in my bookshop as well,
Oh,
creating
how
that
beautiful is
experience.
that?
So the boy got a favorite poetry book, and he kept the ring inside the book, and we did all the lighting and everything, especially for that particular event.
How
I don't think
lovely.
so. These memories are going to go away anytime soon for anybody. So for bookstores, it's the experience that we go there. It's also to talk to the bookseller there, because we can go online, buy books that we want, but we have a tunnelic vision. If you're a biochemistry enthusiast or somebody in a particular field, you'll be spoiled for choices in that particular zone. But when you go into a bookstore, serendipitously you will come across so many things that
Yeah.
biochemistry could be related to golf in a way, or pathology, or whatever. I mean, it's unbelievable the kind of subjects that pop up in, and that also is something fascinating which we can learn.
Yes. So, do you think, what according to you think needs to change in India and globally, to build book selling as a very skilled, respected career path? And how can community driven experiences, support that vision? This is certainly, there's a lack of trained booksellers. Not everybody is really trained, like you, Mohit. Uh, so, tell us a little bit about that.
See, the cause I think is the industry itself. We are very closely knit and closed industry. Very few people come from the outside who find their own calling in this industry, whether it is in book selling or publishing or anywhere. So people within the industry only evolve and become. Now, this also works good for the industry, but it has its own downside. So one, we have to open up these things where we have to now, India, I think, is ripe for specialized bookstores. I mean, we don't have, I don't know many, a travel bookstore, for example. We all have seen Notting Hill. Now, we don't have a single travel bookstore that I know of, a comic bookstore or something like that, which I think could also create space. But as a community, if we bring children or families or even individually, when we have, or rather making time to go into a bookstore to browse, it's a very basic thing. But if that is inculcated, a therapist would eventually start giving this as a prescription. I'm pretty sure about that. At least my friends have started doing that. That go to a bookstore, just browse, just be, don't go there to buy something, don't go
My
there.
father did that,
So
Mohit.
that generation was absorbed in experiencing,
Yeah, yeah.
and that opens up a different world of ideas for all of us. So I think from a lifestyle perspective, that is one thing that needs to change and inculcated rather. And from the professional perspective, I think we are also trying to figure out, because book selling is a tedious process. I mean, I consider this a little boastful, but when you go to a pharmacy, for example, the patient comes to a pharmacy with a prescription of a doctor that these are the medicines that we require. But when somebody comes to a bookseller, the bookseller has to be the doctor and also the pharmacist there. So it's a training that has to come on ground. Anybody, there are a lot of people who want to open bookstores after they retire. So they have to contain that kind of knowledge to be able to, recommend something to somebody.
Yeah, amazing. So there is a place in London called the Poetry Pharmacy also. where you go in, and of course there's a book also, and I mean it's amazing. I love bookstores. They my childhood memories are all about holding my dad's fingers and walking into bookstores, because he was a voracious reader, and till his last days, he was only reading and reading and reading, and till the time his attention span could be there. So the smell of a bookstore, the pages, the ink, all of that to me is the best romanticized version of life. uh,
I very strongly believe, Mahua, because your father took you there, it created a beautiful memory which you will never forget in your life.
no, never.
So those are the kind of experiences that we have to create not only for our children, our spouses, our friends, anybody for that matter.
Yeah.
And that can happen into, it's an amazing intellectual space where you also have the freedom to explore what you want to do.
Yes. And nobody pushes you to be in a hurry. In a bookstore, you can just browse, for as long as you want. And I think in today's world, I think that's a luxury, Mohit.
I deny that. Booksellers are also highly judgmental. You come and browse in my bookstore, spend an hour and don't buy anything. Next time I'm going to remember you.
I don't think so. Now let's talk about public libraries. They are vital to any smart city, right? Yet many have lost. There are libraries I see around places that have gotten shut. They've not been able to continue. So, what makes a great library, and how can the government really better support such spaces in India? Because I think we're all beginning to realize that digital cannot be the only way, for growth. There has to be all of these.
So to make it a sustainable model, I think there has to be a lot of collaborations to happen. One, and of course, again, it will boil down to the people who are standing behind the counter. So a library is not only because of the books or the infrastructure, it's also the person standing behind that counter. So we have to again go back to the basics, find those kind of people, and we cannot unfortunately invest in training them. So maybe as community initiative, people people basically like you and I can schedule an hour or maybe half a day from our busy lives, go into a library and start recommending books as per our choice. So a library can create that kind of calendar. I mean, unfortunately, I'm not at a space where I can do that right now, but we are designing that kind of stuff and preparing ourselves. Once the funding comes, we can create that kind of public library, because as a government initiative, it's not going to happen with only the government help putting in the money. They've tried multiple times. So sometimes, unfortunately, the person sitting behind the counter making decisions or choosing the books, they only see the right side of the menu. So apart from the people, the second aspect of having a good public library is the curation of books that we keep there. And then to, of course, make it engaging. So there are a lot of public libraries all over the world who are creating such beautiful experiences again. I mean, imagine having a wine tasting evening in a library, and then you have books or authors coming in and talking about that. There are multiple things that can be done. And of course, now again, people who are volunteering, a senior lawyer doing a storytelling, or a very senior judge or medical doctor doing a basic storytelling to 4 or 5 year or 6 years old in a library, that is cathartic for an entire the atmosphere of the city.
Yes.
So the functional aspect has to come from the community. The basic infrastructure, I think the corporates and the government can collaborate to create it. That's the only way I see that happening.
So, what's your philosophy when it comes to recommending books? And can you recall a moment, where a book really changed someone's life?
Getting into conversation, I don't think so. The way my little bookstore is designed, nobody can go outside without talking to us. It's not possible. You just have single entry, single exit. So the first aspect is talking to them. One of the first questions that we ask is, of course, how can I help you on the basics? But then I try to get deeper into, what they are doing in life. And sometimes I've been playful in these kind of questions. What are your dreams? And immediately I get to know that this guy is here to buy a book for his girlfriend, or this girl is here to buy a book for her father. So those are the little aspects that we have to be very sensitive about, and that's how the recommendation automatically pops up. I mean, it's, you've done that for so many years, sitting in the same space. It's something you don't train for. It just automatically happens.
Amazing, Mohit, amazing. Bookstores have closed down, even award-winning ones, right? So, what has helped Rajat Book Corner, survive where others have shut? And what role does community really play in keeping a bookstore alive? We would love to hear that from you, Mohit. I would love to have a bookstore of my own.
So the first aspect, why with God's grace we've been able to survive, is because if we didn't have any customers, I would conveniently put up my feet and get busy in reading a book. That I did for a long, long time. But when I started a family and I realized that I had to pay my son's fees and all of that, then the pressures started coming in, and then the realistic thing happened. So the other aspect, how it helped me, the reading itself helped me sell more books. We did not sell a book only for selling sake. There are instances where I've seen my father, and I've done that multiple times, when a customer is picking up a book and I would say, no, this is not for you, don't take that. Even if I knew that that book has been kept there for such a long time and it's not sold, and I have an opportunity. So the business sense does not unfortunately prevail at that time. It's that personal connection of making, the reader connect with the correct book. That particular aspect, that small sincerity, and that, it doesn't have an immediate effect. Somebody picks up ₹1,000 book and you're saying don't take that, and eventually you recommend them a ₹200 book. It doesn't make business sense at all. But then that ₹200 book gives a repeat customer, creates trust, creates a faith, and that's how, slowly and gradually, we have three generations of people coming in together in the bookshop. So the other day, a very, very senior taxation officer, she came with a daughter and a 2.5 year old granddaughter. And literally, I was holding the granddaughter, and all three of us were reading out a picture book to her. She was sitting on my
Oh,
counter. So these are the little
how
experiences.
beautiful.
Exactly. These are the experiences that a bookstore has to create. Now, making that into a commercial enterprise is can happen when the community gets involved. So, Mahua, when you are opening a bookshop, I'll be more than happy to volunteer as a bookseller there.
I don't know if I can afford to have you there as a consultant, but for sure, I would love the samosas, the chai, and the laughter. So, finally, for our listeners, Mohit, what's that one book you think everyone should read at least once in their lifetime, and why has that you would choose that?
It's very difficult to pinpoint one book, primarily because for every mode, for every weather, I would say, for every company, there's a different book there is. But one book, if I close it down, I think it will be Charlie Maxey's The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. I simply love that book. I may have read it more than 100 times with my son, with my father, with my wife, with my friends all over. Why I say that is simply because when I was going through a tough time, I had to open and shut a bookstore. And of course, there were other reasons and the other, challenges. There's a simple quote in that book where the boy asks the horse, what is the bravest thing you've ever said? Help, says the horse. So that, opened up a different dimension for me, where although I had my back to the wall, I started reaching out to friends and community to help. And it's unbelievable. In the past few years, we've done independent author sessions in more than now 30 cities.
Amazing. So we wait for you to come into Bangalore too, Mohit, with all the magic that you do. And we would love to collaborate with somebody as amazing as you are. And, for our listeners, if this conversation made you want to step into a bookstore or pick up that book that you've been meaning to read, just do it today. And if you've enjoyed listening, share this episode with a fellow reader, leave us a review, and follow the stories for more and more stories and more change makers like Mohit Batra and stories that matter, they need to be read. Thank you, Mohit, for being on today's episode with us. It's been an absolute honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Mahu. An absolute honor as well.